Hey y'all, it's David Ducker coming back at you, and today we're going to be talking about minotaurs from the land of Minoa, monster ecology style. So this is how I do minotaurs in my game. I've just recorded my video on cyclopses, so check that one out. I'm not sure which I'll publish first, but eventually I will publish them all. So minotaurs, let's start off with appearance. Minotaurs stand about 7 feet tall in my game. They have the head of a bull or a cow for the ladies, and the legs of a bull or a cow for the ladies, and the torso of a man or a woman. So pretty standard. I don't do anything really crazy with them. They're not like a centaur-like creature because we already got centaurs to worry about. Although I haven't filmed their video yet. But again, I will in time. So minotaurs. Start with food and cuisine. So the minotaurs live kind of in a desert wasteland, but they do have a couple of rivers running through it. So along the banks of these rivers, they practice agriculture, and they do grow wheat there. And also herd sheep and goats and pigs and chickens. So they've got this agricultural base, but their cuisine tends to be fairly bland. There's a lot of bread, especially flat bread, and there's a lot of meat going on as well. But they don't really do a lot with spices or vegetables. It's mostly just bread and meat and some beer made from that grain as well, but not a whole lot else. It's not a very fertile region, so they don't have a lot to work with. Now their agricultural base is of course all run by slaves. The minotaurs are the slave lords of my setting. They hate to do work by themselves. So they've enslaved all these other races to be their farmers and their laborers and their soldiers. And the minotaurs are a higher state of being according to them, and they should not have to do any work because these other servants have been put there to do it for them. So the treatment for the slaves is not often good. The minotaurs are known as being fairly brutal in that aspect. So that factors into their agriculture, so I'm just mentioning that there. As far as their architecture and art, again, it's a very slave-based society. So there will be these enormous ziggurats built for the minotaurs and the minotaur priest kings. The minotaur god emperors. And these lush palaces with hanging gardens and fountains, this oasis of paradise for the minotaurs. But most of the population of the city is slaves, and they'll be living in like mud brick shacks, these little houses, just crammed in there together. Very poor sanitation, very little decoration. Just really put down. So this huge divide between the minotaurs up on high and the slaves being kept down really low. So again, their architecture features a lot of statues, especially of bulls and minotaurs. The bull is a very sacred animal to the minotaurs, or minotaurs if you prefer that pronunciation. So they have a lot of statues of bulls, and that factors into their art, as a lot of bas-reliefs or bas-reliefs in the walls of their ziggurats and palaces, as well. Statues of bulls guarding the entrance, these huge staircases coming up to the temple, with the huge bull statues flanking either side. So it's a very important image for them, is that bull. As far as clothing, minotaurs don't wear a tremendous amount of clothing. Their region is very, very hot, so typically they'll wear a loincloth or a kilt. The females will wear like a short tunic or a short dress. Some of the males will, but it's less common among them. They also tremendously enjoy jewelry. So I have a lot of gold and silver, chunky jewelry, just bracers and large elaborate chains and crowns and armlets, rings, piercings. So they, girdles, big belts with gold paneling all over it, an enormous belt buckle, perhaps with a bull head or some crossed scimitars. So jewelry is very important to minotaurs. It measures their status and shows off their wealth. They're all about wealth and opulence and being rulers and dictators. That's very important to them, that the gods have put them up above the other races. This is something they truly believe, that they are better than the other races. And that factors into their clothing as well. So let's go into their government. So they're very tyrannical. They tend to have dictators. And they tend to be theocratic dictators. So they're very big on this king, priest, god, emperor type caste or class, rising up above everybody else, putting them down. They're very rigidly stratified. So you have the god emperor and the priest kings, and then the priests, and then the warriors and the slave drivers and the merchants. And then way down at the bottom, you got the slaves and everyone who's not a minotaur. So very rigidly stratified, very Byzantine in their politicking. So there will be a lot of shuffling for power, trying to impress the god emperor, trying to replace or assassinate the god emperor, the padishah, the king of kings, as they call him. And their entire region is very unified as well. They are an empire. It's not little city-states all competing the way a Cyclops might do. They're very, very unified, or the way satyrs or centaurs would, where it's just individual tribes. So they're a major power, and they all bow down to that god emperor, the padishah. He's a really big deal. He's supposed to be like a living avatar of Zeus. Their military is largely slave-based. So they'll send out the slaves, and they'll have slave drivers pushing them forward. The slaves will be given very little in the way of armor or weapons, usually just a wicker shield and a spear. And that's about it, because that's the cheapest weapon set that you can equip someone with. So they'll just send these hordes of slaves, and they're not usually very well trained out there. They might have slings and javelins as well. Whereas the minotaurs, the slave drivers, will typically have chariots, very often scale armor. Scimitars are their preferred weapon, and they'll have shields as well, and bows. Minotaurs enjoy archery to some degree. So they'll be out there in their chariots directing traffic, directing the troops to the degree that the troops can. Again, very disorganized kind of fighting style from those troops. Although the god emperor, the priests, the shahs, all of these characters will have elite bodyguards, minotaurs trained to actually fight and protect them. So that's very, very important to them. A minotaur bodyguard is a really big deal. That's a stamp of special elite quality in the whole setting. And some of them are even eunuchs, so they can guard the sultan's harem as well. So that's their military style. We've got their government. Again, their religion, very important to them. They often put Zeus up as the most powerful deity. He's the king of the gods. And minotaurs are the king of all the other races. So Zeus is the best god for them. Aside from Zeus, they also enjoy Hades as the god of wealth, as well as Demeter, goddess of agriculture, because they have such a hard time growing anything. She's very important to keep them alive. Ares, god of war, because they're always trying to get more slaves and more territory for the empire. So they worship many gods in Minoa. They're very religious people, and they often involve blood sacrifices as well, sacrificing slaves or sacred cattle. Not generally minotaurs; they wouldn't sacrifice their own, but cows are sacred to them, cattle, as well as the life of a slave has a lot of value. So that's a great offering to put before the gods as well. Economically, they're very slave-based. The slaves grow the food. The slaves mine the metal. Slaves create all of the jewelry and weapons for them. So it's very kind of internal economy there. They do practice some trade with the other races as well, especially for luxuries. From the Gorgons of Gorgoa, they would get wheat and a lot of vegetables and wine, which they can't grow well. Same thing from the humans; they get that other stuff because humans have a more lush environment. From the satyrs, they could get wood and herbs from their forest, furs. From the cyclopes, they can get, of course, fish, but also wooden goods, such as maybe some ships or very fine chariots. So they would definitely practice some trade, but it's not incredibly important to them. Much more important is to be holy, to have many slaves, to be a successful general of your armies. So they're much more martial than mercantile. I think that's about it for minotaurs that I have right now. If I missed anything, leave that in the comments below. I'd also love to hear how you use minotaurs, make them into a playable player race. Get the religion of Zeus, get the slave drivers, the charioteers. Maybe get that intrepid merchant who's kind of going against custom, or someone who's actually nice to his slaves. Get a PC who was a slave to the minotaurs. That could be very interesting. But I think there's a lot of things that you can do with them in my setting, but also just in general. So I'd love to, again, hear all your comments, and you can look forward to the next video as well for the Greco-Roman races. So I'm going to sign out, and I hope you all have a good day.